Never.
She said one of her first memories is her parents handing her a roll of toilet paper and her remembering thinking, what is this for? and now you like literally you would never know. So she told her story, and it's a long story. It's a really cool story. But yeah, then I told a little bit of it last time, so that's a good one. Any other reasons for being here, or just want to learn?
I wanted the diet part, but all those look
They all
the
look
right thing.
good
You know what
question.
to eat.
The brain thing, I had no
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
So very cool. And one of the things is, a lot of times when things come out in the research, they say it takes either 14 or 17 years for medical research to become medicine practice. Okay, so a lot of things, like gut health is one of those. You may have heard of that now because it's coming out and becoming more popular, but it's still, you go to your MD, you're not going to hear a lot about healing the gut because they haven't yet made a pharmaceutical drug to promote that, okay? So a lot of the stuff that's coming out, and I'll share a little bit of the research, that's my favorite part personally, is the research that's coming out on the ketogenic diet. And one of the things that persuaded me to do it, because I don't want to lose weight, that's one of the benefits, but the brain benefits that I've personally felt as well have been really, really dramatic. So the first page is just some steps to download that book. You can do that when you get home if you want to. The second page are these 5 questions to just keep us on track today. So the first one is, why should I follow a ketogenic diet? Hey guys, there's a handout right there. So why should you follow? Well, that's kind of what we just talked about. I'll tell you a few of the populations of people that the ketogenic diet is becoming more and more popular for. One is for weight loss, and I would say that has been the longest term population. That's been going on for a really long time. Actually, the longest. Over 100 years ago, the ketogenic diet has been medical standard of care for childhood seizures. Okay, and that's all research coming out of Johns Hopkins, and that's in the early 1900s, and that's still the standard of care for drug-resistant epilepsy and childhood seizures. Okay, so that's one of the brain benefits. But another category of people that it's getting really popular with is endurance athletes. Okay, and people that go out for long bike rides, long runs, long rows, because when you can become a fat burner, your body has plenty of it stored on you. Okay, and then you can go for a long time with a lot of endurance. The other one that's coming out now a lot are the brain benefits. Okay, so ketones are actually neuroprotective against Alzheimer's and dementia. And a lot of this research right now is coming out of our major universities like Ohio State University, University of South Florida, Yale, Boston College, Boston University. And those are some of the big categories of why you should follow a ketogenic diet. So for weight loss, I'll use the example of how many of us have heard of the Atkins diet? Right? We've heard of that. And we hear good things and we hear bad things, but it was pretty successful for weight loss. But there were some flaws. There were toxic foods that were involved. There are definitely some flaws, but that was a ketogenic diet. You starve your body of carbs, and your body learns to burn fat, and you lose weight. Okay, so that is leading into the next question. So those are some of the reasons of why I think that somebody should follow a ketogenic diet. If you're an endurance athlete, if you want increased mental clarity or brain health. And I also will say, how many of us have heard of Dr. Mercola? He's a famous online health personality. Well, I saw him speak in March, and he was talking about the ketogenic diet. And he said, how many of you have seen the movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper? Has anybody seen that?
Yes.
Okay, so he takes this pill. They say we only use 10% of our brains, right? And so he takes this pill that allows him to access the rest of his brain, and he has crazy mental super abilities. And Dr. Mercola said that's what it feels like to be in ketosis. And I would echo that. The first time that I transitioned into ketosis, I read 3 books in 1 week, and that's not normal for me. I like to read, but not at that rate. It was really quite eye-opening. And I have a patient. His testimonial is on our YouTube page. He's lost 120 pounds following a ketogenic diet, and so that's a pretty big life change, right? Everything in his life is different. His wardrobe. His ability to just play with his kids without getting winded. I mean, everything has changed. And I said, what's the biggest change? And he said, I'd say it's the mental. Okay, and so it really does do that. So ketones, we're going to get into what is ketosis or what is a ketone. But ketones are fuel for your brain, a preferred fuel source for your brain. And I'm going to talk about that.
Can I ask an important
Absolutely.
question? I went on the Atkins diet. My husband was able to go into ketosis.
Yeah.
And he did great. Well, just before I went into ketosis, I fainted.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and passed out. And it wasn't a good diet for me.
Yeah.
I tried off of it. But my husband and my son, they went on it and lost weight.
Yeah.
So, is this something I have to go to that point where I go?
I wouldn't say so, but I would say that just based on your past experience, yeah, you want to be careful. But I don't think that you're going to have that problem. But I'm going to teach you a few ways that you can measure it and see, maybe your blood sugar dropped, well, I don't want to say too low, but there's ways that you can kind of track it and measure it. And I always encourage you to do something like this with some supervision. But the ketogenic diet you can really do on your own. But if you're going to do anything like fasting, that's something that's always safer to do with some supervision. So I don't know how you're going to respond. I've never heard of anybody fainting before, but I would be a little more leery of it just because you've had that past experience. But I think that you'll be completely fine. But ask me at the end too, and after you hear the rest of it, if you're concerned at all, I can show you some ways that you can keep track of that.
Are there ever any other problems like headaches or any other?
Yeah. During the adaptation period, and that's where you were. You said right before you broke into ketosis.
Yeah.
It takes about 3 to 4 weeks sometimes to break into ketosis, and so during that time, some people experience what's called a keto flu. And that means you feel bad. And we're going to get into that right here with, are you a sugar burner or are you a fat burner? Because if you're a sugar burner, your body's used to running on sugar and you begin to starve it of sugar, sometimes that can cause you to not feel good because you're just so used to having a high sugar diet. And so with this question, are you a sugar burner or are you a fat burner? Which one do you think most Americans are?
Sugar burners.
Yeah, sugar burners, right? Because, in the 70s and 80s, fat became the enemy. And so they began to take fat out of the foods. And that makes it taste funny. So what do they have to put in to make it taste better? Sugar. And so you've probably heard this, that our society, we eat a ton of sugar. Okay, and they're finding that that's at the root cause of obesity, of cancer in many ways, in a lot of inflammatory diseases. Sugar fuels inflammation. So that's the first question to ask yourself, is whether or not you are a sugar burner or you are a fat burner. And I'm going to flip through this and flip back a couple times with the questions, but let me show you this. So when your body burns sugar, that's like burning in your house wood, right? If you burn wood in your house, in your fireplace, you have to have a chimney, right? Because the smoke that it produces is toxic. And that's like inflammation. So you have to have a chimney, because that's how, when your house burns down, more people die from smoke inhalation than they die from being burned. Okay? But when you're burning fat, that's more like a natural gas stove or even a artificial fireplace. You don't have to have a chimney. It burns cleaner. Fat is a cleaner fuel than sugar is. So when your body learns to burn fat instead of burn sugar, it burns cleaner, creates less inflammation. That's another one of the big research topics, is that the ketogenic diet reduces inflammation, especially inflammation of the brain, and reduces what's called oxidative species, which are, we've heard of antioxidants. Antioxidants are the opposite of oxidants, and so it reduces antioxidants. So when your body is a fat burner, it's a cleaner fuel. The other thing that I want to show you is, if this is a graph, and this is time, and this is blood sugar. When you are burning sugar, it's kind of like, say you have that fireplace again, and say that's responsible for heating your whole house, or you have a wood-burning stove, let's say, that heats your whole house. And so if you're throwing kindling on that fire, that's your body on sugar. And you guys know this, and you've felt this before, where you get a spike. That's when you throw the kindling on, it spikes up with flames, catches really quickly. But what do you got to do 15 minutes later? Throw more kindling on, throw more twigs on. And so when you are eating a high sugar diet, your sugar spikes and then it crashes. And then it spikes and then it crashes. And then it spikes at lunch and then it crashes. And then you need the afternoon snack and then it crashes. And then it spikes again at dinner and then it crashes. When you eat a high fat diet, your blood sugar never spikes. When you eat, go like this, and then it can go a long time, and then you can eat and go like this, and go a long time, and you go like this. So it's a longer burning fuel. That's why it's becoming so popular for endurance athletes, because they don't have to go out on a ride and have a bunch of bars in their pocket or eat a bunch of carbs. You know, we've all heard of carb loading, maybe. For carb loading for endurance athletes, for runners, for cyclists, they'll carb load before a race so they have lots of sugar in their bloodstream. But then when that dips, when they burn all that off, if they don't have anything in their pocket or in their backpack or in their saddlebag of their bike, they are going to hit a wall and they're going to crash. And the ketogenic diet is more of a crash-free diet for these type of athletes. So are you a sugar burner or are you a fat burner? And the answer is typically just you're a sugar burner. And even somebody that looks like myself, I obviously I don't store fat very easily, but we're all genetically different. And if you look at my parents, you look at my grandparents, they all look like me. So it doesn't necessarily mean that my body's a really efficient fat burner. It just means that I don't store fat the same way. So you have to measure it. And I'll tell you, when I first began measuring some things in my body, I was pretty surprised. I was high in inflammation. My blood sugar was higher than I want it to be. And when you get those spikes and crashes with your blood sugar, hyperglycemia, too high of blood sugar, and hypo, maybe fainting from your blood sugar being too low, those are both risk factors for diabetes, both equal risk factors for diabetes. So you can be skinny sick just the same way that you can be obese and sick. Okay, and so that's a really important thing, that it's not about your size or shape, it's more about what's going on in your body with your metabolism. And your metabolism can only use two things for fuel. It can either use sugar or it can burn fat. Okay? So the next question, what is ketosis or what is a ketone? Okay, so ketosis is a state in which your body is burning fat for fuel, preferably burning fat for fuel. It doesn't mean that it doesn't still use sugar. It just means that when sugar's not there, it will burn fat. The alternative is if sugar's not there, like say you go out for a long run and like I said, you get a crash, your body will begin to burn its own muscle because it can turn protein into sugar. So sometimes that's one of the downfalls of the Atkins diet, was very high in protein. And if your body is still a sugar burner, it will just convert that protein into sugar in a process that's called gluconeogenesis. Big word, but that's what that means, is converting protein into sugar. And if you're not feeding it protein, it's going to get it from your muscles and break that down. A ketone is the byproduct. When we talk about the smoke that's made from the fire, that's the ketone. The ketone is the name. It's made in the liver, and the ketone itself is what goes to the brain and what the brain is able to use as fuel. So you can actually now, today, it's just coming out, but you can actually take ketone supplements, okay? And that's an exogenous, meaning from the outside, taking ketones, and they go to your brain, and your brain can use those as fuel. But it doesn't mean that you're in ketosis. It just means that you've provided your body artificially with ketones. And there's a time and a place for those. I think they're a useful tool, but I think the way that they're marketed now is that you can get into ketosis by just taking this product. And I don't think that that's always safe, and I definitely don't think it's safe long term, because it can shut down your body's own ketone producing pathways. You want to be, you can use those supplements to get your body into ketosis, or you can use them if, say, you're in ketosis and you go out for dinner at a friend's house and they have a higher carb meal than you would like. That can kick you out of ketosis, and maybe the next day you could take the supplements to get yourself back into ketosis quicker. But I don't want to spend too much time on those supplements because
Is that kind of like the craze of the raspberry ketone a few years ago?
Yes.
Is that the byproduct of like, I don't know, the raspberry, I don't know how they really, or if that's even effective at all, but.
It's effective. I don't know a lot about the raspberry ketones. I remember that. But now, I'd say in the last year, it's coming out a lot. There's a few brands. I've sampled a few of the different brands to kind of try them and see what's different. Some of them have fillers and sweeteners, and I'd say they're over marketed. But yeah, it's really starting to come out now. One of the ways that this is coming out is out of the University of South Florida, and one of the ways that a lot of this research has come out is they're funded by the government to work with Navy SEALs and the highest level military personnel. And they're really heavily studying the ketogenic diet for divers. When divers go down deep and they come up, they can get brain toxicity, and ketones can help prevent that because of their neuroprotective factors. So ketosis is the state in which your body is producing ketones. And that can get kind of confusing, so I just wanted to clarify what do these words mean. And then the ketogenic diet is one way that you can get into ketosis. Okay, so 3 words that all sound very similar. They all mean close to the same thing, but it can be kind of confusing. What is ketogenic? What is ketosis? What is a ketone? So does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So ketogenic diet, that is the answer to number 4. But before we talk about the diet, and that's what I want to spend the most time on, because the first time I did this talk, I spent the most time on the research, and at the end it was like, oh, we got to rush to talk about what do we eat? How do you do it? And then that's really the most important part. If you left here with nothing but that, say, hey, it's good, here's how you do it. But that's what we want to spend the most time on. But the first thing before we talk about the ketogenic diet, one way to get into ketosis is fasting or restricting your body of food, period. Okay, and I'm not recommending that you go home and you start fasting without supervision, but that is a very, very fast way. I said at the beginning, I mentioned that your body goes through a period of keto adaptation, which usually takes about 3 weeks. And that's if your carbs are restricted to a certain level, which we'll talk about how you can measure that, how you can look on the food label. But if your carbs are restricted to a certain level, in about 3 weeks, you'll start producing ketones. And that can actually be measured. So I brought my blood meter here that'll show you how you can measure that to know. And how, can I ask you, how did you know that your husband was in ketosis? Were you using strips?
They were using strips.
Urine strips?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So what I often encourage people to do is use urine strips at the beginning, because they'll tell you yes or no, whether you're in ketosis. A meter like this will tell you how much you're in ketosis. But the strips are expensive, the strips for this. So I've had patients that they'll just be burning through strips, and they're still not yet in ketosis. Like, God, it's getting expensive. So I'll tell them to use the urine strips until they're in ketosis. And then when you're in, you can measure a little more specifically with a meter like this. And I don't know how much of this we will be able to cover on the meter, but I'll show it to you for sure. But in the ebook, I tell what the brand is of this, where you can buy it, where you can buy strips the cheapest, and how you can measure it to know. But fasting is a really, really effective way. You can scoot your chair over if you want. I see you sliding over. Sorry. So, how many people have heard of caloric restriction? Has anybody heard of that? And that it's the caloric restriction, restricting your calories, is the only thing that's ever been scientifically proven to increase lifespan. Okay, which is wild, but that is the only thing that's ever been proven. But how many of you know that when you do a diet where you restrict calories, eventually it doesn't work? Have you guys ever been through that? Those are like the yo-yo diets where, for a month you cut back your calories, you just count your calories, but then most people, they lose 20, they gain 30. They lose 20, they gain 30. I've heard people say, I've lost 1,000 pounds in my life, but I've gained 1,200. Maybe not 1,200, but more than they've lost, right? And that's a yo-yo diet because your body knows. When your body goes into starvation mode, it says, oh my gosh, we're starving, we need to store, right? So fasting, I always use the example of, if we put you on a deserted island for a month, you're not going to die, right, if you have water. So your body has fuel. Your body will survive. What it does is it learns how to burn fat. Now, when you get off that deserted island, you're going to want to binge and eat a lot of food. I'm not saying to fast for 30 days, but by restricting calories, it's not always the safest way. So you want to find a way to trick your body into burning fat. Not trick, that sounds bad or harmful, I'd say. But you want to find a way to get your body to burn fat without thinking that it's starving, okay? So how do you get into ketosis? Well, you can do fasting for like a couple days. You can do what's called intermittent fasting is a great way. Intermittent fasting is becoming more and more popular. And what that means is you don't fast for several days, but you fast for longer periods of time. And if I go back to this chart real quick just to show you, this is what most of us do. We eat breakfast, then we eat a snack, and then we eat a lunch, and then we eat a snack, and then we eat dinner. And even, some people you've probably heard of eat 6 small meals a day, and all that does is spike and decrease your blood sugar. And that is what's going to stop your body from burning fat and keep it burning sugar. So intermittent fasting might be more like, for the first few hours of the day, you don't eat. Then you eat lunch. Then you eat dinner. And then you don't eat for the rest of the day. So you're not restricting calories. Let's say in this day, you ate 2,000 calories. But you ate it in 6 small meals, 5 small meals. In this day, you can still eat 2,000 calories, you're just not eating as often. You don't want to necessarily eat less. You want to eat less often so that you're not spiking insulin as often, which is what high blood sugar does. And that's really the key to getting into ketosis is lowering your blood sugar and lowering your insulin response. When insulin goes low enough, ketones will go high. So some people, they'll get into ketosis some people, they'll do intermittent fasting, which means like maybe you skip breakfast. Typically intermittent fasting is you go 14 to 16 hours without eating. So that might be you finish dinner at 7 o'clock, you don't eat lunch the next day until, 9 or 11. So 16 is kind of the magic number there. Sometimes for some people, 14 might be an easier way to transition into that. Sometimes for women, they specifically need less restriction. But then as you continue to restrict, you can go longer and longer. When you're in a ketogenic diet, sometimes you forget to eat because you don't get the cravings, you don't get the crash, and you just forget to eat. But you don't want to constantly restrict calories. You don't want to eat less. You want to eat less often. So how do you get in like that? That's one way. Fasting, intermittent fasting. But then what we're going to talk about the rest of the time is following the ketogenic diet. So when you do eat, what do you eat? Even if you're intermittent fasting right here, well, let's say we'll use the red and blue again. Let's say you intermittent fast, but this is a lunch of a turkey sandwich. I'm not going to write on that. It'll take me forever to write. A turkey sandwich, potato, or French fries. You go to a typical fast food restaurant. Hopefully we know that fast food is mostly junk because of all the other things that are added into it. But even if it was real food, even if you bought it here, a potato and a sandwich on gluten-free bread, it's still very high sugar, high carbs. So it's going to spike your blood sugar. So you can do all the intermittent fasting you want, you're not going to get into ketosis if you're still spiking your sugar like this. So you want to follow a low carb diet, which would be more like a spike here, you'll burn for a long time, and a spike here, you'll burn for a long time. Not as high of sugar spikes.
I heard that if you get below 1,500 calories, that's dangerous.
Yeah, I would say so too. I would say that goes back to what I said, that you don't want to eat less, you want to eat less often. And one of the things with a high fat diet, fat, here's carbs, 4 calories per gram. Fat is a higher energy food. We know that because it has 9 calories per gram. And calories, we think of calories as weight gain or weight loss, but calories is a measurement of energy, a measurement of heat production and energy. So fat is a higher energy food. So one of the top 3 mistakes that I say if people want to lose weight is sometimes they can be eating too much fat because it's higher energy and they're like, I'm not losing weight. And they've actually increased from, say, maybe 2,000 calories a day up to 2,200 calories a day without even knowing it. But yeah, going that low, I would say, is not good. You don't want to be restricted of calories, just not spiking your insulin as much. So what does a typical breakdown look like? I'm going to say carbs is CHO. You put pro for protein, and I'm going to put fat. Those are your 3 macronutrients, they're called. So a typical breakdown would be fat, I should put that one first, 70 to 85% of your calories coming from fat. Protein, let's do carbs, 5 to 10%. And what's that leave us with? 75 and 95. 5 to 25% protein. And that's a pretty general breakdown, okay? And I'm going to show you a more specific way of measuring it and an easier way of measuring it. But that's a pretty general breakdown. Now, the reason that there is a range there is because it totally depends on first off, you and what you're doing all day. Okay, so if you are a construction worker, right, you're moving all day, that's completely different than if you are at a desk job. Or if you're an endurance athlete or an athlete of any kind, you're going to need more protein, and you can even survive on a lot higher carbs than somebody that's sedentary all day. So like I said, Janice's son's my best friend. We've skied together this week 3 times. We burn a lot of calories. We exercise quite a bit. And we can absolutely get by and still be in ketosis on higher carbs and higher protein, just because of the energy that we're expending through that exercise. So the more sedentary that you are, and even if you're walking 30 minutes a day, if you're not intensely exercising, you want to restrict this one the most, which is carbs. Maybe CHO might not make sense, but yeah, you want to restrict that one the most. That's what's going to determine how you're going to get into ketosis. So everybody, endurance athlete or not, can restrict carbs. The endurance athlete or the athlete in general can just get by with a little bit more. So what I would suggest for everybody is restricting a lot of carbs at first, and then you can start adding them back in. And if you're measuring especially, you can find where your limit is. Some people are going to do better with more or less carbs, with more or less restriction, but each one of us is different. That's why I encourage the meter so strongly. It's $25, is not expensive. And then the strips, are a couple bucks a piece. So if you get to the point where you're measuring your ketones maybe, 1 time a day, and what I encourage people to do anyway is to measure a lot for a week, really get to know how your body reacts and responds, and then start measuring less and less and less often. Because as you start to learn how your body's reacting and feel how your body's reacting, you'll start to know. I haven't measured my ketones for quite a while, because I know how I react to different things. And you can also measure your blood sugar, and it will tell you some of the answers as to where your ketones are going to be. One of the things I want to mention too with intermittent fasting is sometimes if you just go home tomorrow and you're a sugar burner and you start intermittent fasting, sometimes you don't feel so great, because as your blood sugar drops but your ketones don't move, then you don't feel good. You hit that crash and you need a spike of energy and you just don't feel good. You get hangry. But what should happen is as your blood sugar drops, your ketones should rise. And that will be when you're in ketosis. So intermittent fasting is a way to get in there, but just a warning, not everybody can jump into that right away. Or if you did a full fast, like a strict fast, you're gonna go through some periods of time where you don't feel very good. Usually if you know anybody that's done fasting, let's say a 4-day fast, usually day 1 they're okay, day 2 and 3 they hate life, and day 4 they feel amazing. And that's the ketones. Okay, I had a patient, she did 28-day water only fast. And this was her decision, but she did 28 days, which is insane. She only lost 8 pounds because she didn't do it for weight loss. She didn't need a lot of weight loss, but her blood sugar crashed to the point where if she would have gone to the hospital, they would have admitted her and said that you're about to go into a coma. But she felt amazing. That was when she felt the best because her blood sugar dipped and her ketones were off the charts. And so she felt great during that time. So that's something else I want to add there. But the carbs, that's going to be their number one thing, is restricting those carbs. So what do we want to see per day? 30 to 40 grams of what's called net carbs is what we want to restrict to. Okay, and I'm going to explain what that means, because that term net carbs, that is what, actually persuaded me that this diet could be healthy. Because 30 to 40 grams of carbs is, if you're just looking at the food label, that's not very many carbs. Okay, but net carbs, I'd say this is maybe the most important part about this. Net carbs are carbs, this is on your food label, so we'll look at these, minus fiber. Okay, so fiber is a carb. So it's counted as a carb on your nutrition label, but fiber passes through your system. It doesn't cause a big insulin spike. It gets a free ride through your digestive tract. So let's use the example of a salad. I always use the example of a salad, that if a salad is 100 grams carbs, it might be 80 grams of fiber, right? Because you're getting the lettuce, you're getting the maybe spinach or kale or the other vegetables in there. So there's a lot of fiber, and so those don't count. So this doesn't have to be a plant-restricted diet. You hear high-fat diet, you think, butter and lard and coconut oil and meat all day, and that doesn't have to be the case at all. I actually still consider this a plant-based diet, and you can do it as a vegan. It's harder, but you can absolutely do it with no animal products. Chia seeds, flax seeds, some of the higher fat vegetable sources, coconut, some of the higher fat, lower carb sources there. But net carbs, carbs minus fiber. So that's why I wanted Janice to bring these out so that we can look at a few food labels. I love cashews. That's why I said cashews specifically, Janice, because when I began doing if you hear somebody say, and I've said this for years, increase your good fats in your diet, that's something that everybody should do. Whether you want to go into ketosis or not, increase good fats in your diet. So before we go into this, what do you guys think are some examples of good fats? Avocados, yes. That's fish, yes. Especially cold water fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, and smaller fish too are better sources. What are some others? Nuts, yeah.
Like almonds?
Yeah, almonds are a good one. Cashews are a good one, a good source of good fats. But here's what you don't want to do, is you don't want to increase your fats and increase your carbs. So cashews are my favorite nuts. But when I first started, learning about the ketogenic diet, really became strict on counting this, I stopped eating cashews. So let me show you these, show you why. This has 9 grams here and 2 grams there. So it's 7 net carbs. That's not horrible, right? But if you want to stay under 30 or 40 per day, that's going to add up. So when you look at some other nuts like almonds, like macadamia nuts have about 2 grams of net carbs, or pecans have 0 grams of net carbs. What's the other one that's, walnuts. Pecans and walnuts, yeah, very low in net carbs. So if it's a taste thing and you love cashews, you want to count, okay? And you don't need to count forever. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of counting, but what I've done is I have an app on my phone, and so for a couple weeks I started counting my net carbs and tracking it to just see where I was at. And then you kind of get a grasp of it. You kind of know which foods are higher in net carbs and which foods are lower, which meals are higher, which meals are lower. So you make a salad, let's say back to the other example, or that example, you make a salad and maybe you add, instead of adding nuts, or instead of adding cashews, maybe you start adding, or pistachios, you start adding pecans or walnuts. Or instead of adding, absolutely not, like balsamic vinegar, instead of adding that, you start adding MCT oil or coconut oil or olive oil. Is another great source of good fats. So I'm going to write down some of the ones that you guys are saying, because this is really, what you probably want to know is what do you eat? So, avocados, olives.
How many, a whole avocado?
You can. If you can, yeah, an avocado a day is a great thing. It's depends on your taste. I don't personally like just scooping avocado right out of the skin, but a lot of people do. They'll put some sea salt on it and eat it out. For me, it's like a texture thing. I like it when it's in stuff, but I don't like it plain. So everyone's going to be different. Olives, olive oil. Here's a big one. Coconut products, I'll say. So that's coconut oil like we have here. There's now coconut, there's coconut flakes, there's coconut flour, so you can still bake on a ketogenic diet. One of my staff has a degree in holistic nutrition. She makes amazing keto desserts with almond flour, with coconut flour. She'll use stevia to sweeten it so that it's not horrible, and she makes amazing desserts. They're brownies, they're, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you, cookies, and they're really, really good. So if you think that this is going to be a restrictive diet, it absolutely doesn't have to be. You just have to learn, what you can use.
What about the whole wheats and the spelt flour?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just got into that. Oh.
Yeah. So that's a no-no. So that would be, those are heavy carbs. So no grains. I would say no grains at all. Yeah.
Other than your coconut.
Other than what?
Flour stuff.
Yeah, but those aren't grains, because coconut is a nut, so it's not a grain. A grain would be wheat, like barley, rye. Mm-hmm. Those are your grains.
Quinoa would be grain.
Quinoa is in the middle. Quinoa is like a pseudo grain. It's kind of in the grass family.
It's got a lot of
not
protein.
nearly as it does have a lot of protein. It's not nearly as inflammatory as some of the other grains. The grains, first off, high in sugar. So for our conversation today, they're throwing you out of ketosis immediately. But even if you're not on a ketogenic diet, grains are really inflammatory. Okay, they're an upstream product of an inflammatory, like you've heard of omega-3s, probably. We hear a lot of good things about omega-3s, but there's also bad omega-6s. Those are inflammatory, these are anti-inflammatory. And grains, for yourself or for the meat that you eat, conventionally raised meat, they feed it grains, so it does exactly what it does to humans. It makes them fatter quicker. So if you're a farmer, that's a great thing, because your cow is worth more money in less time. But it makes them sicker, so they have to take hormones, they have to take antibiotics, and then you end up eating that meat and you're high in omega-6s. And grains are an upstream product of those omega-6s. So that's one of the reasons why we hear a lot about omega-3s, but we just don't hear enough about omega-6s. But you need to reduce these while you raise those. So I'll put down here, just like that, grass-fed animal products. Okay, and that's why you want it to be grass-fed, is because the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio will be more like, this is going to get confusing now, I'm running out of room, 1 to 4 in a grass-fed animal. In a conventionally raised animal, about 1 to 20. Okay, we run this lab in my office, do this test, a blood test, and when we've averaged all of our patients, guess what they average? 1 to 20. Okay, and so they're massively inflamed. When I first did this test 3 years ago, I was 30 to 1. And I was heartbroken, but that, sometimes testing is awesome because it lets you know where you're at so that you can correct it. So grass-fed animal products, that would be like, meat, but also butter. I'm not a big fan of dairy. A lot of keto things can be high dairy. You can definitely eat a lot of dairy products and go into ketosis. I don't eat much dairy at all. I haven't drank milk in a long time, but I'll do some grass-fed cheese or raw cheeses, and I'll do grass-fed butter, and that's a good way to get into ketosis. Another one that we talked about last time, and actually Janice helped me find it afterward because I needed some, but MCT oil.
What is that?
That is, MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides, which is just the length of the fat. There's short chain fats, there's medium chain fats, there's long chain fats. And that's what's really beneficial about coconut products. So let's go, is the MCTs. They're quick burning, they're really fast, efficient fuel. Your body can break them down really quickly. So like even if somebody's doing, say, a fast and they get lightheaded, they feel like they're gonna faint, we'll tell them to take a spoonful of coconut oil because it won't spike your blood sugar at all, but it'll give your body some quick fuel so you don't feel like you're gonna faint. And let's see what this says.
Atkins doesn't tell you any of those.
Oh no, yeah. No, there's a lot of things that Atkins, that some of the concepts, and that's why, it has a bad rap sometimes, but it also has a good rap. Like your husband and your son, they lost a lot of weight. And a lot of people did, but they don't get into the details as much. They also don't talk about anything about the grass-fed meats. They don't talk about anything about the toxicity levels of certain animal products. And that's something that I'm really big on is making sure that your food is non-toxic because you definitely don't want to accumulate toxins in your body. So this says something about MCT. It says, so this is cold pressed. It says the cold pressed method is used to preserve the MCTs and they're beneficial fatty acids naturally found in coconuts. Oh, that's all it says. So this says total carbs, 0 grams. Now here's something that will scare some people, but it shouldn't. It depends on kind of your age and how long you've heard this before. Not trying to be ageist, but if you're older, you've heard this for a long time, that saturated fats are bad, right? Because in the 50s, saturated fats became the enemy. And this has a lot of saturated fats, 12 grams. 14 grams of total fat, 12 grams of saturated fats. And I would say that is true in conventionally raised meats because there's good saturated fat and there's bad saturated fat. So that's why Atkins doesn't distinguish the difference between those two. And I'm not telling you to go eat a lot of conventionally raised dairy products and meat products. I don't think that that's healthy, but I think that if they're raised properly, they can be a part of a healthy diet. But I still like for it to be plant-based because plants are always very, very healthy. So this has 14 grams total fat, 0 grams of total carbs. Let's look at this beef jerky. So this is all natural beef jerky. Low fat, so it's not going to be keto friendly. I knew that before, but and high protein. But let's see what it says. Well, 0 fiber because it's meat. There's no fiber in it. But 6 grams of total carbs. So that's not bad. 5 of those grams are sugar. But that's in one. There's 3 servings per container. So let's say you had this beef jerky laying around and you had nothing else to eat, but you wanted to stay in ketosis. You just want to know that you're eating 6 grams of total carbs in this. So that would go towards your 30 to 40 grams per day. And so let's go back to that actually, the 30 to 40 grams a day, because that's how you can get into ketosis. And then I'll wrap this up and show you the meter real quick, and then I'll take questions. I'm sure there are some. So 30 to 40 grams per day. You could do it at 50, it would take longer. You could do it at 30, it'll take shorter. We also teach a rule, it's called the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 rule. And I'll teach you 3 rules. Rule 1. Rule 2, the 2-2-1 rule. And rule 3, the 5-1-1 rule. And I'll explain what each of those are. So rule number 1. Sorry if you can't read that. This is 10 grams a day. Then you can do a 20-gram day. So say this is a week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Or what I would say is a better way to do it, but it's a little bit harder, is say these are weeks. You do a week of 10 grams a day. Then you do a week of 20 grams a day. You do a week of 30 grams a day. Now, this is why, one of the reasons, first off, you're going to transition faster because you're going to be restricting carbs more. But also, if you do a 10 gram a day week, it's not easy. Okay, I mean, you're not eating a lot of carbs, and not just the way that you're feeling, but just the things that you cook, the things that you find. I mean, staying to 10 grams a day is very, very hard. Staying to 30 grams a day is relatively hard. 40 is a little bit easier. 50 is a lot easier. So you can either do this in days or you can do it in weeks. I'd say that weeks is better. So week 1, week 2, week 3. And so as you transition, you're able to add more carbs in, but your body is still learning to be a fat burner. Week 4, week 5. And so like with as you've been in ketosis, like say you've been in and out of ketosis for a year, some people can handle up to 60, 70, 80 grams of carb a day. Athletes can handle up to 100 grams of carbs a day, which is, still by American standards, a low carb diet, but it's a lot less restrictive than 10 times less restrictive. So as you transition, you get a little bit more leeway and a little bit more leeway, and you can begin to add carbs in. But the way to know is to measure it. So if you do a 30 gram day and you measure your ketones the next morning, say, and you're in ketosis, then the next day you do a 40 gram day and you're out of ketosis, well, at that time, your magic number is somewhere between 30 and 40. So you don't want to go over 40, you want to stay closer to 30. Now, say a week later, you do the same thing, and you're fine at 40 grams, then your magic number has increased. But the only way to know, like I said, is to measure it. So when you're measuring, I'll tell you that real quick, ketones 0.5, that means you're in ketosis. And this only makes sense if you have the meter, but 0.5 is millimolars. 0.5 and up to 3. And you can go above 3. My patient that I was telling you about with the 28-day fast, she was at 7. I've heard of people at 10. But about above 3, you don't get many more benefits. You don't feel much better. You don't get any much better brain benefits. So as long as on the diet itself, 3 is kind of the upper limit. So you might be.
What would be the optimal?
Optimal is about 1 to 3, I'd say.
Okay.
0.5, you might feel it, you might not. I would say that you probably won't. You won't be like, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. Above 1, you'll start to notice a feeling difference. And then the higher the better, I would say, but 3, you just don't need to go over that. So at 2.7, 2.6, you're in pretty strong ketosis. And if you do intermittent fasting, even if you're not on a strict ketogenic diet, in intermittent fasting right before your first meal, like let's say you're going to eat your first meal at noon, you might be at 0.5, mild ketosis. And I'll tell you why. Another reason why the meter and the strips are important is I have so many people that will say, I think I'm in ketosis because I feel a lot better. But lower carb diets and restricting grains, restricting sugars, you just always feel better. It doesn't mean you're in ketosis. So we'll say, okay, well, let's measure it. I think I told you last time that Joshua, he was like, I think I'm in ketosis. I said, let's measure it. And he wasn't yet. So he knew that he had to keep going to get into ketosis, but he was already feeling a lot better. So that's how you measure it on the meter. I can show you that afterward if you want, if we have time. But let me go through this other rule. 2-2-1 is a great way to help you transition in. That is 2 tablespoons grass-fed, that's GF, butter. 2 tablespoons coconut or MCT oil. And even if you're eating 10 grams of this fat and 10 grams of that fat, some fats are more ketogenic. They turn to ketones faster, butter being one, coconut oil and MCT oil being another one. So 2 tablespoons of that, and this is per day, 2 tablespoons of that, and then 2 teaspoons of sea salt. And that's a really important just side note to mention, is that when you're on a ketogenic diet, when you go into
Wait,
ketosis.
for 221, it's still 2. Wouldn't it
Oh,
be
I said,
221?
yeah, 1. Yeah. No, excuse me. I was mixing it up with this rule. It's the 2-2-2 rule. It is 2 teaspoons. 2 teaspoons of sea salt. 2 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons, 2 teaspoons. I was just getting confused, I think. So when your body goes into ketosis, it can cause mineral imbalances or electrolyte imbalances, and the sea salt eliminates that. Sea salt's important too, not iodized salt, because that's sodium and chloride. Sea salt, Himalayan, yeah, that's great. Has 80 different minerals.
Take a teaspoon in water every morning.
That's great.
I mean, I'd rather diet.
Yeah, that's great. And that's exactly what I do, is took a teaspoon in water. 2 teaspoons is quite a bit, right? If you took that all in water, it'd be hard. But if you did it in the morning and you did one in the afternoon, that's great. And that's exactly how I take it. Is I might do a teaspoon in water, and then throughout the day, if I have a salad, put some on there. If I have dinner, put some on there. And your body, your body's going to let you know. Your body's going to be craving salt too. So it's not going to be hard to do this, but it is important to do that rule. And that'll also help you just transition and break in. Then the 5-1-1 rule. This is a great rule too that I'll put down here. 5 days intermittent fasting. I'll write that all out. Intermittent fasting. So like we talked about, basically skipping breakfast. That's the best way to do it, because then all through the night and all through the morning, your body's fasting. It's great for a lot of reasons. It gives your digestive system a break. It gives it gives your digestive system a break, gives your metabolism a break. And the longer it goes for a break, it can rest, it can repair, it can regenerate. So 5 days of intermittent fasting, 1 day full fasting. So maybe like on Wednesday, you eat Tuesday night dinner, you don't eat until Wednesday night dinner. So 1 day of full fasting, and then this is for your body to not think that it's starving. 1 day feasting. And that means you eat breakfast, you eat lunch, you eat dinner. You're not feasting on like breads and carbs. You're still following your keto principles, but you're just eating as much as your body will allow you to. And that one, a lot of people that follow this diet for a long time, they'll say that this is the one that keeps them sane, because that 1 day they feel a little bit less restricted. And you can go higher carb on that day. Like I said, not breads and grains and things, but you can go higher carb on that day because you're just eating more. And you want to not let your body think that it's starving, because if it thinks that it's starving, then it's going to think, we're starving, we need to store. We need to store for the winter. So 5 days intermittent fasting, 1 day full fasting, 1 day feasting.
And you'll lose weight on this.
Yes.
You should.
Yeah, absolutely. And without even restricting calories. Like I said, I'm a patient, the most that I've experienced in my office, 120 pounds. But yeah, definitely.
But you stop at a certain, you don't get down. If you keep on this
Oh yeah,
diet,
your
you
body
don't-
will, like even, the other person that I mentioned, the 28-day fast, she only lost 8 pounds.
Right.
So however much your body needs to lose, it will. And that's, another thing that I really believe in, is that your body's really, really smart. Right? Your body's going to tell you. So listen to your body. Sometimes in the beginning especially, it's going to tell you, hey, we need carbs, hey, we need carbs, hey, we need carbs. So you don't always listen to it. But yeah, eventually your body's going to regulate and settle at a happy weight. And so the ketogenic diet, I don't think it's something that needs to be followed forever. And I don't think that it's great to. I think we talked last time about the Hunza people, which are, and this is just one example of a population that lives a really, really long time. But you think back to like kind of a paleo principle, or kind of how we were designed. In the winter, there's not a lot of plants growing, so a lot of populations, they eat more animals. They go hunting. They eat more lard. They eat the whole animal. Then in the spring, while they're waiting for food to crop up, they're kind of fasting. They call it the fasting period is the spring for the Hunza people. And then in the summer, they're more plant-based because there's plants growing, right? And that's kind of thinking back like how we were designed or how people live naturally. And so like explorers used to go to the Hunza people in the summer because that's when they could explore easier. They're in the Himalayas. They thought they were vegetarian, but in reality they weren't. In the winter, they were eating almost exclusively fat. And so that's something that you can cycle in and out of it. I know people that will go into ketosis in the summer because they're cyclists or because they're runners. Or I know people that will go in the winter just because they feel better. It produces actually more body heat, things like that. So you can cycle those. Yeah. So what questions do we have?
So that's versus other cultures who lived on grains.
Like name one.
Well, the Egyptians stored up tons of grains.
Yeah. But that's not all that they ate, and they didn't live on
No,
grains.
but-
And most grains weren't that prevalent until modern agriculture came around. And that's kind of when modern agriculture really began. But if you look at what they ate a lot of other plants too. So yeah, there really are no societies that lived on grains. But biblically,
But-
grains are the staff of life and different things. So
During the winter time, where the Hunzas were eating fat and animals, other cultures, or was it before? Are the Hunza in the paleo category?
no, not necessarily. Paleo is looking back thousands and thousands of years. I can't tell you how many thousands, but like the Paleolithic area was like cavemen, barely speaking. The Hunzas they still do this, even in modern times. The Egyptians, when you begin to store food and things, that's the beginning of modern agriculture, fields, storing food. So I'd say that there's, the paleo is way back, Egyptians are kind of in the middle, Hunzas are even more modern day, but there's still there's still a season for everything, right? And so that's what all I was saying was that you don't need to be in ketosis forever. You don't need to do the same diet forever. You want to keep your body guessing. So you can go in and out of ketosis at different times. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You said there was an app you had that
Yeah.
you're tracking that car.
Yeah, it's called Chronometer, no H, CRONO meter. There's several out there, like I think MyFitnessPal is one that can track like how many calories you take in, how many calories you burn a day. I think some that connect with like Fitbits and things, but Chronometer is a really good one. So yeah, that's something that I encourage you to do at the beginning, is track so that you know. You can measure it, just by looking at your food labels.
So is what is it,
Chronometer.
Okay, is that the blood test?
No, that's an app. That's an app on
That's
your
the
phone.
app.
It's just like a calorie tracker.
Oh, okay.
And it's not just calories. It tracks a lot of different things. It's pretty detailed. But you put in like, for breakfast I had 3 eggs and a tablespoon of coconut oil, and for lunch I had half a cup. You need to measure, but of cashews. And then at the end of the day, it will spit out you did this many calories. You did this much was fat. This much was protein. This much was carbs. And it even breaks it down into your vitamins and minerals.
So what about the meter that you have there? with
Yeah.
the urine strips?
Yeah, so great question. So urine strips, like I said, they will tell you kind of yes or no.
Are they like keto specific urine strips?
Yeah, I think. Do you know you bought them before?
Well,
Do they say urine ketone strips is what they say, right?
Yeah, my son bought them.
You can get them at Walmart, I think, and
Yeah, my
you can
son
definitely
bought
get them
them,
on Amazon.
and they were, what was required for the Atkins diet.
Yeah,
so
that-
I
yeah.
don't know what.
If you type it
But
into
they were like at the pharmacy.
Yeah,
so-
yeah, and
so
that's
they
why I
were
think
for
you can-
some kind of test.
I think you can get them at Walmart in the diabetic section, because you can get blood sugar meters at Walmart in the diabetic section. They just don't measure ketones. So the ketone one you need to get on Amazon typically. But if you typed it into Google, it would pop up. So they're easy to find. I just don't know what store you would find them at.
So what's yours called?
But the meter, this is called a Precision Extra. So you can see like, Here's some of my blood sugar numbers: 83, 87, 80, 99,
And that's
88.
measuring your ketones.
It measures both
Okay.
blood sugar and ketones. So let me find my latest ketone number on here. I measure blood sugar more often because the strips are a lot cheaper. And so like one weekend I'm into experimenting. So one weekend I pricked my finger 40 times. It wasn't bad. Everybody says that. It wasn't that bad. But 20 times on Saturday, 20 times on Sunday, just morning every hour basically, and after each meal and after exercise to see what happens. Because exercise will spike it because your body releases stored sugar from your muscles for fuel. But then after exercise, it will dip because then your body burns that fuel. And so you have to learn how your body reacts. Some people, let's say, if you drink coffee, some people, if you drink a cup of coffee, your blood sugar will go down. Some people, if you drink a cup of coffee, your blood sugar will go up. It depends on how metabolically challenged your cells are. And so, like sometimes, like coffee as an example, sometimes at the beginning, it will cause your blood sugar to spike. But then as you restrict carbs, as your metabolism improves, then it will start to go down. Okay, and this is all going to what's called, I'm going to draw one. It looks like this. This is your mitochondria. And that is what produces energy in your body. And so fat and sugar go in. Metabolism is just the study of the mitochondria. Fat and sugar go in, mitochondria make it into energy. And so if your mitochondria are very damaged, which I would say that most people, to some degree, they are metabolically challenged because we've been sugar burners for so long. So as that improves, because your body can heal, and it does, that's all it does, it's what it's designed to do. As it can heal, your metabolism improves, your mitochondria improve, and you can handle different things better without it spiking blood sugar.
So can you drink water at any time?
Oh yeah. You want
lot of water.
a lot of water,
Right.
more water than before. Yeah,
More than 8?
more than 8 cups. A general rule of thumb, I'd say, is half your body weight in ounces. So if you weigh 150 pounds, 75 ounces. If you weigh 200 pounds, 100 ounces. That's a pretty general rule. That's a good rule to go by.
Half our body.
So
Half
yeah,
our body weight in
half your body weight in pounds or whatever you're